works. And then let's see if I can change the slides, and then Mom, you're up. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so before we start any of our grief talks, we always start off with a disclaimer. So many refer to us as grief counselors. We are not counselors or therapists or licensed technicians. We are advanced certified grief recovery specialists that are trained and certified by the Grief Recovery Institute to teach a method that may be therapeutic in nature. However, as specialists, we focus on teaching people a method that allows them to go from their head to the heart. And we will explain that further, what that means as we go through the presentation. So the grief recovery method has helped thousands of grievers over the last 40 plus years and is the only evidence-based program that effectively assists grievers in dealing with personal emotional loss, no matter the cause. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
It's up. Can you see it?
Yeah, hold on. Sorry. Okay, so we also start off with commitments. We want you to have a safe space here with us. So before we get into the why we are here, we set some expectations and commit to some things that you all get most out of this seminar. So the first commitment is keep an open mind. So we are going to be talking about some things that may be different from what you know to be true. It may be different from your perspectives and your knowledge around grief and human emotions. So we ask that you be open to the possibilities of looking at things differently as we go through our presentation. The next commitment is no judging others or self. So one of the major blocks we have on our healing is judgment. Judgment from others and judging ourselves. So give yourself grace and compassion as you reflect on your life and the loved ones you have lost as we go through the presentation today. Our third commitment is no comparing losses. We have learned to intellectualize our losses, our broken hearts. We tell ourselves things to discount our feelings. So we want you to know that all grief is felt at 100% by you. It doesn't matter what anyone else is feeling, even if you suffer the pain from a relatable loss. For example, you tell yourself, I need to be strong for my kids. The truth is, if you are telling yourself this to minimize your pain because it's too painful to feel, so you focus on why kids' pain hurts more than yours, or that it's more important than yours, all of your grief is important and should be acknowledged and not minimized. And lastly is no apologizing for human feelings or human emotion. If your tears come flowing, let it fall. This is the first step in giving yourself permission to feel. So let's type a 1 in the chat if you agree to these commitments. Okay, I see some ones coming up.
Yep. All those ones are coming in. All right. Thanks you guys so much for committing to that. It's so important that we provide a safe environment for you and also give you that that space to be able to just feel all of your human emotions as we go through what we're going to be talking about today. So before we get into the subject of why we're really here, some of you may not have been here last week. So we just want to briefly recap what we talked about last week. We're not going to go over all of the details. And so if you would like the slides, I'm not sure how well that will help you if you didn't come last week, but we can certainly share it with you. Just send me an email. So the first thing that we did was we paid a tribute to the loved ones that have died by suicide. And it was such an honor to do this for all of the family members that were present last week, Thursday, and that offered their loved ones pictures so that we can share it with everybody that was on this call. It was amazing. And it was just so heartfelt. And we just want to thank all of you that shared that with us and allowed us to share it with everybody here on the platform. The next thing we talked about was the definition of grief by the dictionary. Grief is the normal and natural emotional reaction to loss of any kind. And today we're going to talk about what another grief definition is that we actually use in the grief recovery method. We also talked about the myths of grief, right? Why we can't move forward in our healing when we have a broken heart. And we're actually going to go back into detail on this one on this presentation because we know how important it is. We talked about emotional isolation. It's one of the biggest things that we do as grievers is we isolate emotionally. But for specifically around suicide, there's a lot of emotional isolation because of shame, because of blame, because of guilt, because of stigma, because of inaccurate words that we choose instead of grief or instead of what we're feeling, right? We also talked a lot about unresolved grief. Remember, grief is the normal and natural emotional reaction to loss. Unresolved grief is what keeps us stuck. It's all of the things that we wish could have been different, better, or more, or all of the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. It's the unresolved grief that we as grief recovery specialists can help you heal from. All of that undelivered communication that you may have had with a loved one that has died, or even those that are living. We talked about what it means to recover, and we went into detail on that as well. And you learn all of that when you make a decision to heal your heart and you want to come and work with one of us. You will definitely know exactly what it means to recover. We talked about how to take the actions to heal your heart, again, using all the right tools instead of all the wrong tools. And we're going to talk about that as well here in tonight's presentation. So in a nutshell, that was what we talked about in part one. So here's our second definition of grief. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. When I first heard this grief definition, I was like, say what? It was such a long definition and I had to read it again, right? So grief is the conflicting feelings, caused by the end of or change, right? Ending or change in something that is familiar to you. When you think about the world that we're living in right now, this pandemic, remember last year in March of 2020, when the world shut down, literally the globe shut down, we now went into this crazy, unfamiliar territory of everything, from people having to work from home, from companies having to readjust their operations so that their employees can work from home, for kids having to go to school at home, parents having to multitask, having to be teachers and workers and parents and all of that, right? At one time or in between. And so it was a lot. We went through this, the end of not hugging people, right? Because it was scary in this pandemic, not meeting up with people, right? We are humans. We are wired to connect. We're wired to be with each other and feel and have affection, right? And we couldn't do that, right? Last year. And there's a lot of people that are still in that place today. So much fear in the world. The pandemic caused a lot of conflicting feelings. I heard a lot of people that are introverts that said, oh, this works for me. I don't have to go out and mingle with the world. I love staying home, right? So for them, they were happy, they were at peace, they had gratitude that they could stay home. Others were also thankful that they could be home and be safe with their families, but then we're also feeling frustrated and like their bubble was being invaded by their family, right? So you had these feelings of, I'm here, I'm with my family, I'm going to connect, but oh my gosh, I need my space. Conflicting feelings, right? We felt a lot of the highs and the lows all at the same time because everything that we knew that was familiar to us ended or changed in our life. And so when we talk about all of the different grief events that we go through, like with me, for example, when Frank died, the conflicting feelings that I had was that I'm very grateful that my husband didn't suffer, but I was mad and I was heartbroken and I was scared all at the same time, right? And I was also grateful for my family that was there, but also didn't know how to tell them that they were making my pain worse by the things that they said and did because they had no idea how to help me, right? So conflicting feelings. You will learn through our programs that grief is all about conflicting feelings when something in our life ends or changes and the familiarity is no longer there for us. So grief is more than just the death of a loved one. I'm going to ask my co-hosts here to also chime in and talk about some of their experiences of what they have grieved in their life other than the death of a loved one. In grief recovery, we say that there are over 40 life events that bring on feelings of grief. We listed some of them here. This is not all of them, right? If you notice, there was definitely divorce right at the top, right? Divorce is right up there with death, relationship breakup, loss of career, loss of finances, loss of health, lots of losses, right? And then you also see on the other side there change, right? Change in social activities, change in work, working conditions, change in schools. So change, loss, end to something, traumatic events that happen in your life also bring on feelings of loss, which in turn are feelings of grief. The one that I want to share with you is marriage. I had no idea that I was grieving when I got married, and now I know why, grooms and brides suffer from the wedding blues. Their hands are sweaty, right? They're pacing back and forth. They're having second thoughts. Should I do this? Oh my God, this is crazy, right? I can't believe I'm going to do this. And they get all nervous and scared. Brides show up late, grooms show up late. There's a lot of stress and anxiety happening right before you say, I do. Now I know why. Because that end or change in your life is now going to happen. You're no longer going to be single and independent. Now you're going to have a partner that you have to share your life with and be respectful of their feelings, what they want in life, what are their loves and, their hobbies and all of these things. For me specifically, when I got married, I was very happy that I was marrying the love of my life, but I was also very sad because my family wasn't there. And even though I chose to get married on that day, my mom, I'm sure, remembers it very clearly because she cried all the time because she wasn't there. She asked me to wait and I didn't. I had already set my date and I wasn't about to change it for anyone, not even my mom. But then the day of my wedding, I was so sad. And I couldn't believe that I made that decision to walk down the aisle and not have my family there to experience this one-time event in my life, right? So I was happy that I was marrying the love of my life, and I was sad that my mom and dad and my sisters and my brothers were not there. But I was also very scared about what life was going to look like now that I was going to be married. Having a partner, having someone to share my life with, that was something that I've never had before. So marriage for me, I experienced a lot of grief. And I didn't know that. And so I had to work through that once I discovered grief recovery, and that helped tremendously with everything that I was going through in my life. So I want to open it up to the other ladies there to share a personal story around a grief that was other than the death of a loved one. Any one of you guys can chime in.
I'll chime in. I want to share a story about loss of safety and security. I believe it was in 2016. I was on vacation with my daughter, and I had a person that was house sitting. And what had happened was the night that the person, because they would sleep at my house, and then other nights they would go home. The night that the individual didn't stay here, praise the Lord for that, my house got broken into. And all I remember was being in Hawaii, and at 2 a.m. my phone was going off, and it was my house sitter on Guam saying that my home had been broken into, that they entered through my window. And, I had the person go around the house to just make sure. Of course, they called the cops and made sure it was safe. And I remember being so helpless, and I was so devastated. Like, I wanted to just jump on the plane and come back home, because that's how insecure and unsafe I was feeling. Thankfully they took, of course, they took significant things from my house, but the biggest thing that was stolen from me was my sense of security and safety. When I got home, I had to purchase shutters for all the windows, for the doors. It also gave me a lot of anxious feelings. I developed like an anxiety for a while because I couldn't sleep at night. I would get up incessantly to check the doors, put on deadbolts, change all the locks. And I did everything that I could to ensure that there is added security. And for the longest time, I would never be able to go to sleep for the whole night without waking up to get up and check the door, or thinking that somebody was going to invade my home. And I had to really work through that. So things like that, we don't even know we're grieving. I didn't know I was grieving. However, it really impacted my life. And till today, I still make sure that I check the door at least 4 times before I go to bed. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to share something. What I want to share is moving, but it wasn't me moving. It was my children moving. I have always had my kids and my grandkids around me for so many years. And when my daughter Darlene first decided to move to San Jose, I actually was living with her. My husband and I were living with her and her kids and her husband. And when they decided to move to the States, it broke my heart, because I was so used to having the kids around. And when they moved, it just killed me. I cried, I think, for a whole week, because they were gone, and my grandkids were still little then when they moved to the States. And prior to them moving, all 3 of them would come into our room, and they would sleep with us until they were ready to leave to the States. So that was very, very hard for me. And then my granddaughter, which is Darlene's middle daughter, just recently left also and moved to the States. And I actually had the privilege of going with her to help her out with the kids when she decided to make that move. But when I came back home, it was really hard for me, because I was the go-to grandma whenever she needed something, or when she needed the kids to be babysat. So we got really, really close to the kids. So when they moved, it just broke my heart. So I told them that they have to call me every week for the rest of their life. But yeah, I'm still grieving that.
Yeah, I think you need to do a relationship rep on that one, Mom.
Yeah, I know.
Hey, Raylene, you guys want to share something?
Sure, I'll share.
Oh, good, Ray.
Sorry, Sid, you can do it. You can share. Okay, I'll share. Pregnancy is full of change. I got pregnant with my daughter when I was 18 years old. And, at the time, my, fiance now and I, we're just so in love, and having a baby was like, yes, if you want to do this, let's do it. And then I got pregnant, and then I started feeling sick. I started getting, the implantation cramps. And I wasn't sure, like, how was I supposed to feel about this? I wanted this baby, I'm pregnant now. I'm not allowed to feel like sad about being sick or feeling unwell, physically unwell. So, of course, I never talked about that. And then later on throughout the pregnancy, more change, more grief came when, my back was killing me. I couldn't stand long. I couldn't sit long. I couldn't stay in traffic long. My feet got swollen. It grew 2 sizes. And a lot of these things we humor around changes in pregnancy, right? But for the mom, right, for me at least, there was a ton of change that I didn't even recognize I was going through. And then after she was born, rather when I was giving birth to her, I was in labor for 24 hours. I was in the worst pain I had ever felt in my life up until that point. And a part of me was really, really mad about it. Of course, I wasn't mad at, my unborn baby. I was just mad that I was in pain, yet I was so excited to meet my baby. And, I think a lot of the times in my past before grief recovery, I felt these conflicting feelings, but I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't even think that it was possible. I thought that if I'm feeling these conflicting feelings, something's wrong with me. Like, am I bipolar? Like, what is wrong with my head? I shouldn't be feeling like this. It's either you're happy or you're sad, and there's no in between. And then after my daughter was born, more change, right? My focus shifted onto my daughter, and so did my fiance's focus shift onto our daughter. We slept apart for about 5 years because our baby was always in between us, because her dad always wanted her in between us. And I remember thinking, wow, I miss hugging him when we sleep, but I don't know when that's ever going to come again, And, at the first chance I got to move my daughter into a toddler bed, I took that opportunity to do it. And, her dad was like, why are you chasing my baby off the bed? And I'm like, okay, man, you don't know how long I've missed hugging you. But it's like, I didn't even know how to say that, because I didn't want to sound like a selfish mom. I didn't want to sound like I was jealous of my daughter, right? It wasn't that. I just was missing that normalcy, and it changed so much. For a really long time, it was so different. On top of the late nights, staying up late and being lack of sleep, more lack of normalcy, right? A huge major shift in whatever my routine was before I became a mom to when I finally became a mom. And grief continues with that, right? My daughter is now 9 years old, and she's going through puberty, and I'm freaking out. I don't know what to make of it. It makes me really sad, because like when I hug her, I have to be careful, because I don't want to hurt her, because her chest is growing. So it's like, wow, I used to be able to smother my daughter and hold her and cradle her and rock her and kiss her. But now it's like, I feel like I'm invading her space, So I tell the ladies, like, I'm really grieving that. And this grief journey started since conception, right? Since my daughter was conceived, and it will continue for me. And so this is work that I'm gonna consistently have to address, and a relationship that I'm going to have to, continue work on for as long as I'm alive. And so that's the grief I have with pregnancy, the beautiful highs and lows of pregnancy.
Thanks, Ray. And isn't it beautiful that we have the grief recovery tools to help us along this journey?
Definitely.
All right, Miss Kate, you're up, hon.
Oh, I was going to say that as a continuation from, if those of you who don't remember, last year we, at the beginning of the lockdown, we did a grief talk centering on pandemic grief, and we didn't know how long this was going to be, and we thought, maybe at most it would be 6 months to a year, and here we are. We're creeping on 2 years of living this life in a pandemic. So there's a lot of things that have changed. And So a lot of those, one of those things that that we are experiencing now is definitely, for example, loss of autonomy. And there's a lot of back then it was just a matter of being in a lockdown status, and you know everyone teleworking maybe, and not being able to go out and do the things we wanted to do. And then slowly, as restrictions eased, and we've kind of ebbed and flowed since then. We went into a second lockdown, we went through the holidays, we went into kind of the status quo for a long time. Then everyone was getting vaccinated. And so all these feelings that we've been going through in the last year and a half, in addition to all of the things that are listed here, because I know people who literally have done all of these things in the last year and a half, just about. People have gotten divorced, people who have lost their finances, lost their jobs. I lost my health, and am slowly regaining that. But even maneuvering treatments and just regular doctor's appointments in the time of COVID has been very challenging. People have retired. They're just like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm done. I'm fed up with this. I don't know what this is. I can't function in this life. So I'm just going to retire. People have gotten married, in the pandemic, which has brought on a lot of other grief, because you can't invite 400 people like we used to, back then. I was going to get married June 6, 2020, which was D-Day 2020. And that has been put off, not indefinitely, but every time we try to make more plans, we have more, regulations and things that, so just be cognizant of those things, and understanding that grief just isn't just the death of a loved one, and isn't just divorce or relationship loss. It's so many other things. I have a really good friend of mine lost 2 of her fur babies just in the last 6 months. So pet loss, she doesn't have any human children. These 6 dogs were her babies. They lived with her in her home. And they're her babies. And so everyone is suffering and grieving in some way. And pandemic grief is real. So just acknowledge that those are probably happening in tandem with each other.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, all of you, for sharing that. Guys, there's so many other losses that we can talk about. We can sit on this slide all day and talk about all of the different losses. But what we want you to understand, so that you can recognize when you have grief in your life, is that whenever you lose something, so loss of, and attach whatever word you want to at the end of that, or change of, or change in, right? So losses, change, or an end to something can all lead to feelings of grief, right? Conflicting feelings. And so that, is something that we want to be able to share with everybody, because as we're talking about suicide in our talks tonight, and what we did previously, and then next week, has a lot to do with what we say grief recovery, that grief is cumulative, right? But it's cumulatively negative. So what we mean by that is that if you don't heal from something that you've already had, and then something else happens, another loss, another change, it just piles up on top of each other, right? And soon enough, something happens, and we'll talk about what that something is as we go through this presentation. So I'm going to bring up Raylene now, and she's going to talk through the myths of grief, or why we can't move through the pain, right? Just to make it, I guess, in a simpler context for all of you, but we call it the myths of grief. So Raylene's going to go through these 6 and share her story around the 6 myths of grief.
Yes, thank you. So, the 6 myths of grief is something that I had never heard of before I was introduced to grief recovery. And when I heard these myths, I began to piece together all of those events in my life and how these 6 myths were practiced and applied in almost every loss that I had experienced my entire life. And I want to remind everyone that as we go through the myths, please be kind to yourselves. Again, reminding us not to judge ourselves or judge others, right? Because a lot of this information is generational. It's generational information that was passed along to us from well-meaning family members and friends, parents, guardians, and grandparents who believed that these myths were helpful for them, right? So the first myth is be strong. I know that we've all heard this time and time again, maybe continue to hear it. And sometimes we ourselves offer this as a piece of advice to those that we love or to anyone struggling with loss or change, right? Be strong. It is also very particular to our culture in that, you know, being from an island, the culture that we have around grief and difficulty is, you know, our pride intertwines with the way that maybe we want to handle situations, and the teachings as well come into play. And being strong is a sign of success. Being strong is a sign of being able to handle, being able to manage, right? Not folding under pressure. And all of that is very unhelpful from an emotional perspective, right? When we deal with what's in our heart, when we deal with what we're feeling, there is no other way to be strong than to share what you're going through and give your pain a voice, right? Because being strong translates many times to hiding your feelings, right? And by being strong, we don't talk about what we're going through. I know that there's a lot of fear and judgment, maybe fear of rejection, or people afraid to tell the truth about themselves because maybe no one around them is telling the truth about themselves, right? And a few years ago, I was in a relationship, and I was in this relationship for a couple of years. I was deeply in love with the person that I was in a relationship with. I was in high school, and we were the couple that everybody would look up to. We won, we were for prom, we were like one of those things, prince, princess, king, queen, something like that. We had tons of friends, everyone, our pictures we took together, and it was great in the beginning, but later on we started going through stuff, and this person that I was with started to treat me differently, right? Was really cruel to me mentally, to me emotionally, and physically. And I never told anybody about what I was going through because I was being strong for myself. I was being strong for my friends who thought that my relationship was like peachy. I was being strong for my parents and his parents who thought, wow, these guys are really going to do it. They're going to be together through high school and they're going to make it out of here. And, our kids are going to get married. And, it's like I was being strong for them. I was being strong for my siblings who saw this person as like an older brother. And I didn't want to share what I was going through. I never told anyone what I was going through. And that leads me to the next myth, right? I began to grieve alone. In my pain after the relationship had gone from great to terrifying, I kept to myself. There was a lot of mental and emotional abuse that occurred daily. When no one was around, when everyone was around, it was happening to me all the time. But I kept all of that to myself. I didn't want to tell anyone that I was struggling. I was ashamed of it. I thought that if I told people what I was going through, then my relationship was null now. Now people wouldn't look up to me. And what did that mean for us, right? What did that mean for my relationship? And it was at that point where I was grieving alone that I had found myself so deeply buried in my pain, that I actually I nearly took my life. I was home alone. I was physically alone. No one was at home. And because I wasn't telling any of my friends what I was going through up until that point, I felt like I had no one to call. I felt like if I called any of my friends and told them what I was going through, that I was being abused physically, mentally, emotionally, that they wouldn't believe me. And they would wonder first, why didn't you tell me all of this? And I really wouldn't have anyone to talk to. And at that point as well, going through that very difficult relationship, I had just discovered that he was cheating on me with someone else from another school, right? And I was devastated. I was completely devastated on top of everything that I was going through, on top of all the pain that I had felt from all of the abuse. I had to deal with that rejection and feeling like I wasn't good enough. And then on top of all of that, having no one to talk to. So I went home one day and I just said, you know what? I'm in so much pain. I need to end this. This is too much for me. I can't. The one person that I love doesn't love me anymore. My parents, they don't know what's going on. I can't tell my sisters. None of my friends have any idea. I can't tell them. I'm completely alone. And I looked around for something to use, and I remember just feeling so confused, so dazed, wondering what am I doing, yet feeling so angry and defeated that, you know what, yes, I'm gonna do this. And then I remember just standing up and I remember just screaming. I just screamed at the top of my lungs. I yelled as loud as I could, and I swear the whole block heard me. And then I began to cry. But I was so alone. I felt so alone. After that happened, I thought, okay, we're not going to be together anymore. That's fine. Time's going to make this better, right? Going on to the third myth. Time's going to heal me. If I just let this go by, I don't talk to him anymore, I'll be fine, right? And people would tell me that. After we had separated, of course, everybody knew because we were no longer together. And advice like, just give it time. Maybe he'll come back. Just give it time. Maybe you guys will work out. Hey, maybe it doesn't work out now. Maybe in the future, it'll work out. A lot of advice from well-meaning family and friends who wanted nothing more than for me to feel better. And I heard a lot of things surrounding time. The fourth myth that I'm going to talk about is keeping busy. After the breakup, I remember just going to my friend's house all the time. I always went to my friend's house, and I never did that before, but because I couldn't stay still because the pain was too much for me to bear, I just wanted to keep busy. So I always went to my friend's house. My friends would go out, they would go drinking, they would go clubbing, I'd go. And I did that every weekend to numb what I was going through, to avoid the pain that I was feeling. All of this still, affecting me very deeply. The fifth myth is don't feel bad, right? This is a myth. This is a piece of advice that's offered time and time again, and people mean it. They mean well when they say, don't feel bad, right? Don't feel bad. There's more fish in the sea. Don't feel bad. You guys would have never worked out anyway. Don't feel bad. That girl that he chose, you're way prettier, or what, she's not even a nice girl, or you're better, you're smarter. People want you to feel better. But the thing about the myth, don't feel bad, are the first two words, right? It's don't feel. And I want to remind everyone that whenever someone is happy, right, we never tell people don't be happy. When people share experiences, when you share experiences, we never hear someone say, hey man, don't be proud. Hey man, don't be happy. Hey man, don't be relieved, but the negative feelings are the ones that we're not allowed to feel, right? Those are the ones that people don't want us to feel. And so don't feel bad is something that it's a habit hard to break, right? Because we mean well by it. But again, when people are hurting, they don't need to be fixed. They just need to be heard, right? And so that's a myth that is offered many time, time and time again. And then the sixth myth, right? Replace the loss. When I went through that very difficult breakup and that, that point in my life, that deep, dark point in my life where I wanted to just die, I wanted to take my life. I eventually was able to, feel somewhat better about my situation and what I was going through. But what I did then was, of course, there was an attempt to replace the loss. And because everyone at school knew that I wasn't with this person anymore, there were people who, kind of wanted to swoop in and offer a shoulder to cry on or a friend to lean on. And, there was somebody who really wanted a relationship with me. And I thought, okay, maybe if we talk, maybe if I pay attention to you, I'll feel better about the person that I had just lost. But it was totally different. It was totally different for me. I didn't want to be with that person. I didn't want another relationship, but my mind, and based off of everything that I've been taught in the past, told me it's okay, just get a new boyfriend, find someone new. But that is not helpful. And it's not helpful because the relationship that you had with that person, with a person who's died, with anything in your life that you're grieving, the relationship you have with that person or thing is unique, right? It's unique to you and that person or thing. And so replacing it is not essentially the remedy for that. And you may feel, people do that to feel better, but they don't feel better. They just feel different, right? And so this replacing the loss is, it's something that we've been taught since a young age. When your pet dies, your goldfish dies, or your puppy dies, right? There's a natural instinct to get a new goldfish, buy a new puppy, right? When you lose it, when there's an end of a relationship, there's a, I'll find someone new. I'll go, date online, or I'll go out to the club and I'll go find another suitor or find someone else. It's something, again, that we do in efforts to feel better, but we don't really end up feeling better. We just feel different, right? So, that's kind of the 6 myths of grief that we come to know as unhelpful, especially when grieving, whatever it is that you're grieving, all the losses in your life. These are very unhelpful. And I was able to connect with all of these myths when I learned about them. So if you have any further questions about these myths, or have any feedback on how they've applied to you, affected you, or, what your thoughts are on that, please feel free to, drop it in the chat, share with us your thoughts. And that is my story.
Thanks, Ray.
Faith, for so eloquently putting that together, continuous. And it's just very obvious how it applied to you, all 6 myths, right? And I like to call it, because it's straight out of the book, it's BS, and that's the belief system. And sometimes when the belief system that we have received, inherited, it's passed on from our people that we love, because it was the way that they handle things, the way they knew how to. And if that's not sufficient, because we know that, the old cliche or quote, no man is an island, eventually we're going to feel like we can't grieve alone. There's got to be some kind of outlet. We know that waiting for a flat tire to inflate itself is never going to happen. We have to be able to take the small and correct action steps. So our body is telling us things, our heart's telling us, it's basically giving signals to the brain saying these 6 myths are no longer good and they're no longer satisfying and fulfilling to me. And what Darlene had mentioned earlier, where it could lead now to a place where things could get a little more difficult. Imagine yourself being in a treacherous river. And in this river, the current is strong. It is really deep. There's debris. There's huge rocks and boulders, and maybe like a tree fell over. and you want the help, but because you were told to be strong, you're not going to ask for the help, right? Because we were told to grieve alone, we're not going to ask for help. So what happens is we may look for other avenues and other outlets that's going to help us. We think it's going to help us feel better. We think it's going to help us mitigate the situation or the conditions of our heart at the moment. And we look for activities to avoid grief entirely, right? And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with any of these, but we call them STIRBs, and it's a catchphrase after you come to our grief talk. So other people, they say it very openly now. Oh my goodness, you're STIRBing. Are you STIRBing? Which is a really great question for check-ins, and we'll get to that. But take a look at the screen and see if some of these things are familiar to you. Because as a griever, I could say that I check mark maybe about 4 or 5 out of what's listed, right? When we look at food, we talk about it. I mean, I've pretty much struggled with my weight most of my life. And I noticed that when I gain the most weight is when I'm really grieving, when I'm really going through some issues. I'm the emotional eater. I'm the person that at 3 o'clock in the morning, when the person that has rejected me isn't there, or everybody's too busy, I can't call them because I feel like I'm a burden. Guess what? There's chocolate at my nightstand, right? There's chips at my nightstand. And now what does that do? They're there to just make me cry my woes away and basically just have a pity party, right? I don't know if you guys ever had that, but food, I always say ice cream makes everything better. And so what happens is when we start to stirb on food, we have eating disorders. It can become medical conditions later on. And maybe sometimes with food, we decide that we're not going to eat anymore. Ever had your heart broken and then you just don't want to eat? Yeah, that's totally not me. I eat when my heart is broken. So food is one of the things that we use. And all of these things you see on the screen, it's either for a person to look for ways to ease their pain, to mask their pain, or avoid their pain. And alcohol, I can attest to alcohol. I mean, we talk about how there's a lot of detrimental effects to alcohol, but I'll tell you what, when you're grieving and you're going through such deep heartache, alcohol kind of makes you forget that you're feeling that. And it also is kind of like the truth serum, right? So if I'm sitting at a bar with some strangers or even friends and I drink enough alcohol, I'm going to be able to tell how I truly feel. We call it the truth serum. So alcohol is another thing. Many times people will engage in using alcohol, and sometimes again, that can spiral out of control. Drugs, and it's not just illicit drugs, it's not just illegal drugs, but now it's also prescription medication, where people will get their hands on some of these things again so that it alters their body, their state of mind, even the way they feel. Working out. How many of you, when you have a heartbreak of any of the losses we talked about, you either sign up for the gym or you start going back to the gym again? Or if you are consistent in going to the gym, now you go more than ever to the gym. If you raised your hand, I was that person as well. When my husband passed away in 2012, it was my New Year's resolution to change the way I was living, to change my lifestyle. I wanted to transform, not because I wanted to look better. It was because I didn't want to die at such a young age, because my husband passed away from a heart attack. And I was so afraid that I was going to die if I didn't take care of my health. And then my daughter would be left with no parents. So I became very excessive, and I was just working to the bone. I even invested so many thousands of dollars hiring a personal trainer. And within 7 months, I lost 56 pounds. So I was basically, I was engulfed in going to the gym all the time, and I actually became obsessed with it. Sex is another thing too. Raylene talked about replacing relationships. And many times when we wonder, like, wow, this person is, promiscuous, things are going on. They were just with this person and now they're with that person. And, they make the joke, like, you change your relationships or your girlfriend or boyfriend the way you change your undergarments, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but sex can sometimes be a stirb, right? And although, because we know that it releases like happy chemicals, endorphins, whatever, but at the end of the day, now people may feel even worse, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do, right? And social media, that's another thing. People take to social media. If you see people that are grieving, social media is an outlet. And it could be an outlet for positive, and it can be an outlet for negative. And it could be, again, used in excess. Another one is gaming. So if you know about, like the gaming on your at home, and you're saying sometimes, guys, gaming, people don't sleep for days. They don't eat for days because they're just so busy with this, and it takes them into this, like, what is it called, fantasy world, right? Where they escape the reality. They're no longer here. They're physically here, but their mind and everything else has just created this different life for themselves. Another one is binge watching TV. How many of us have done that, right? Yes, Netflix. And again, when I'm grieving something, I usually post on Facebook or Instagram, what is the latest, what are your recommendations, right? What's the marathons and all the shows that are out there? And that's usually a time when I'm just wanting to isolate and not be around people. So binge watching TV could be another thing that we do to just avoid, ease, and mask our pain entirely. Another one is keep busy. And that's what Ray had talked about. So think about the times when, you get up in the morning and your life is kind of like a robot. You just are constant. Your framework is in place, and it's just routine. You don't get out of that because you're so used to that structure. You wake up, you go to school, you go to work, you come back home, you go to the gym, you eat dinner, and then you get ready for the next day, and you do the same thing all over again, so that you occupy practically all the hours of the day, so you don't have to think or be in your feels, right? But imagine that, remember again, that your feelings equal emotional energy. So whether you're using your energy to feel or you're using your energy to avoid feeling, you're still using the same amount of energy. And when we take a look at that, again, the energy that we're putting into avoiding our grief will end up with more detrimental situations, as in the next slide that I'll talk about. Again, thank you. I am seeing those comments fly through, and all of the things that you mentioned about shopping, retail therapy, that's another stirb. Joining like a new, or finding a new hobby, and joining like a new organization. Those could also be stirbs, right? If again, you're just using it as a way to escape all of your emotions. So over time, if we don't heal our emotional wounds, they tend to build up. Think about a pressure cooker, because that's kind of common here. When we use the pressure cooker, and what happens when it's ready, right? There's got to be a place where all that steam has to be released. And to be honest with you, I've never used a pressure cooker because I am terrified of it. And I'm afraid that I'm going to get burned, or something's going to happen once that thing just like explodes and lets out all the steam. So imagine our bodies being that pressure cooker. Over time, if we don't deal with the emotional wounds, that could be us exploding in a lot of ugly ways that could actually be very harmful. It could lead to health conditions. Last year, I was going through so much grief, and I ended up in the hospital just like maybe a week after I was dealing with relationship losses with really, really dear friends and a romantic relationship. I ended up being admitted to the hospital for 7 days. And I don't know if it was related. I can't, I won't confirm or deny it, but I can honestly say my heart actually feels that it was definitely attached. It was connected. Okay. Another one is clinically diagnosed mental health conditions. Again, unresolved grief could lead to depression, anxiety. It could lead to, when you go to the doctor and you tell them that you've been feeling sad, they may prescribe you some medication, and then you'll have all these sessions coming through, right? Another one is domestic violence. We believe that hurt people hurt people. So if you're dealing with your own emotional pain, many times it's not even that, we want to feel this way, but you ever have a heartbreak and then somebody just try to come talk to you, and you want to isolate. So you're seriously angry, and you're like, why are you even talking to me? Or if they're saying the wrong things to you. Domestic violence could be one of them as well. And think about the pandemic. what was happening when everyone was quarantining at home. We had to isolate with our families. What could happen if there was unresolved grief in that dynamics, right? So there's many different issues that could take place that could lead to domestic violence. Murder is another one. We've seen it, guys, here in our own island. It's not so much just globally, it's not nationally, but we see it and we hear about it on the frequent here on Guam. Murder. Think about the people that when they caught the people who have actually committed the murder, and they do the interviews. What are the backstories? They're going to talk about trauma. They're going to talk about they were isolated as children. You know, they didn't have any social skills, certain things like that. All of that, you can basically chalk it up to a loss in their life. Self-harm. If you know anybody who's ever engaged in self-harm, or maybe you yourself have engaged in self-harm, I know that research has told us that it's not that people want to go around and, you know, hurt themselves physically because they're already dealing with a lot of emotional pain. But what we found out is that sometimes people will engage in self-harm behaviors so that it deflects the pain from their heart somewhere else, from their emotions to their physical part, okay? And one more is suicide, the reason why we are here today, right? The ultimate thought to ease and end unbearable emotional pain is why we're here, and it's suicide. And it's one of the most difficult things to talk about. Again, suicide is not spontaneous. You don't just wake up one day and say, I want to kill myself today. It may take some time before someone gets to a place where they feel that they want to end their life. We know that these are all realities we face in our lives. We see and hear them pretty much every single day through personal connections or even social media. So why would anyone want to prolong their healing? Why would you, if this is you today, why would you want to not heal from all this pain that you've been carrying, right? Take a moment to reflect on that question. Why would anyone want to prolong their healing? If you were thinking because it has everything to do with shame and blame and stigma and the fear of being judged and unresolved grief because you don't feel safe enough to deliver the communication to someone, maybe you have the loss of your hopes, dreams, and expectations. If you all thought that, we're all on the same page. And therefore, this is an indication that we are not alone. If you have something else that you thought about, go ahead and type that in the chat and we'll take a look at it as we move through. And yes, I'd like to remind you and assure you that all these feelings that you have been experiencing are all normal and natural, and it is grief. So now we move forward, and Darlene is going to go ahead and continue on.
I can get the slides to move. There we go. All right, thanks, Michelle, for that. That was very deep, but it was also very needed, right? Sometimes these conversations, like Michelle says, are really hard to have. And that's something that I really love about this team here with me, because hard conversations is something that we're experts at having, right? Because we know that it's important in order for us to get to the other side, from that darkness to that light. So how do we move forward to begin our healing, right? The first thing, guys, is to love ourselves, to have what we call self-compassion. But self-compassion requires action, right? You have to take those action steps. So the first one is don't judge yourself, right? There's a lot of things that we do in our life and we second guess because we judge ourselves, right? Who here is the biggest critic of themselves? I know I always am. You know, I remember a former boss of mine always said that, "Dar, you're too hard on yourself. You know, you did great. Your presentation was good, or you did great at your, you know, your negotiations or whatever it was that I was doing." And I always found something wrong with what I did, right? So in a place of taking the actions to give yourself compassion, give yourself grace, right? And tell yourself that I did good. Tell yourself that I'm enough. Don't compare yourself to others. right? Or to any other situation in your life. These are some of the commitments that my mom talked about the front end of our presentation. This applies to you in a place of self-compassion, right? I know that, you know, after Frank died, I really did compare myself to other widows, right? I think I told this story in the last seminar, you know, where Michelle and I first met, and a lot of the widows, including her, had already moved forward, and I was starting to compare myself. So now I found myself back in this dark place because I felt now I'm alone again. I didn't know how to give myself compassion because I was comparing myself to everybody else. And I thought, well, if this is the way I was supposed to move forward as a widow, I don't think I can do it. It's not going to work for me. Right? So you want to make sure that you are not comparing yourself to others. Remember, guys, you are good enough just by who you are. We're all unique, right? We say this in grief recovery, that we're as unique as our handprints. Everything about us is unique. How we believe, the relationships we have is all unique. So we never want to compare ourselves to others. Think compassionately, right? We are all about the heart, but we also realize that our brain has the biggest power, right? So our thoughts are where our feelings are going to be generated from. So if we don't think compassionately for ourselves, the feelings that we have are going to be, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm useless, I'm not good enough, right? But if you start to change your thought process about who you are, I'm good enough, I'm beautiful, I love myself, I'm a good person, you know, then you'll start to believe that, and the feelings about yourself will start to change. Speak kinder, right? So it's not just about thinking, it's about speaking. We talk here in grief recovery about giving grief a voice. You want to think it, but you also want to speak it. So speak kind words to yourself. A lot of times we have these expectations that our external environment is where we're going to get that compassion, where we're going to get how, you know, what we're supposed to be, that expectation of who we are. Right? So we're waiting for others to speak about us in a good way, and we never speak about ourselves in a good way. Could also come from that belief system, right? That Michelle talked about, that Raylene talked about. If we believe that we shouldn't be selfish, that we need to always put others first, then a lot of times we are not going to speak kindness to ourselves, because now we're telling ourselves, oh my God, no, I can't do this, right? I mean, how many times have you drove up in traffic and you see the person next to you talking to themselves, right? You can almost bet that they're not saying kind words to themselves, because we don't, right? Almost naturally, we're saying unkind words to ourselves. So we need to change that and start looking in the mirror and say, I love you, I'm beautiful, right? Adopt or create a self-love mantra, right? Actually learned this in the book Compassion Code by Laura Jack, who is all of our grief recovery mentor. She certified all of us, right? Oh, not all, I don't think Kate, she didn't certify Kate and Raylene through advanced grief recovery, she did, but our initial certification, my mom, Michelle, and I all got certified by Laura, and she wrote a book called The Compassion Code. And she tells us in that book to adopt or create a self-love mantra, right? Again, it's about speaking kinder and thinking compassionately about ourselves, but we want to come up with a mantra that is just for you, right? Something like, I love myself, I am enough, I'm okay as I am. I'm okay as I am. Even if you're working towards a more beautiful, better you, the better version of yourself, in this moment, always tell yourself, I am okay as I am, or I am enough, right? You always want to tell yourself that. So self-compassion requires action, guys. Take those action steps to treat yourself better, to give yourself grace, to love yourself in the midst of grief, loss, trauma, whatever it is that you're going through in your life. Remember that there are always lessons to learn from what we're going through, even the darkness. So self-compassion is still not enough. You have a lot of unresolved grief in your life, right? The things that you wish could have been different, better, or more, all of the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations, maybe a lot of undelivered communication with loved ones that have died, right? Or maybe even people that are living, you just don't know how to tell them how you feel, right? So all of this is that emotional impact that we have. It's negative, right? These traumatic events, whether they're now or long ago, remember I told you, it's cumulative. It builds up on top of each other. So how do we get through that? If loving ourselves, showing ourselves compassion is not enough because it's too overwhelming, right? So the first thing is, who is in your inner circle? Ask yourself that. Who's in my inner circle? Mom, dad, brother, sister, my best friend, my closest coworker, my daughter, my son? Who's in your inner circle? Once you identify who those people are, who you could trust, who could be your safe people, then the next thing that you want to do is be intentional about when you need someone to listen. Remember, when someone is grieving, when someone has a broken heart, when someone is dealing with a lot of emotional trauma, they just need to be heard, right? We always say this in grief recovery, grieving people need to be heard, not fixed. And so when you're looking for someone to just listen to what you have to say, you have to be intentional about it. You have to ask for help. How do you do that? Let me give you an example. Let's say one of the people in your inner circle is your sister, right? So you go, hey sis, and I'm really going through something and I need you right now. And your sister comes back and says, yes, of course. What's going on? Before I tell you what I'm going through, I just need to ask you to just listen to what I have to say. I'm not looking for your advice. I'm not looking for you to tell me how to feel because I already know how I feel. Just need you to be my heart with ears. Can you do that? Now what you've done is you've set the expectation for this conversation. You set it up so that you've protected yourself from being judged, from being compared, from being ridiculed, from being told how to feel. And you've also taken this huge weight off of your sister because now she's actually listening to you without thinking in her mind, oh my goodness, what kind of advice can I give her? What am I going to say? She's not even really listening to you if she's already thinking about how to respond. But when you need someone to be your active listener, to be a true heart with ears, it takes a huge weight off of their shoulders because now they're just there to hold space for you, right? Michelle said that earlier, just hold space for me. It's all I need. And a lot of times when you're going through something in your life, you just need to get it out, right? You're giving it a voice. So tell your emotional truth once your sister or whoever it is in your inner circle agrees. Now you have that safe space, so tell your emotional truth, okay? Now, if that is still not enough and you need more than just giving it a voice, you need more than just, I need you to listen, because now you've got, again, all of this unresolved grief happening in your life. You need the right tools to help you heal from all of that unresolved grief, right? A lot of experts out there, guys, a lot of experts. We never say that grief recovery specialists are the best. We just say that we're different, and we are. We're different because we are heart-centered. Everything is emotional with us. And so we can talk to you about the expertise that we have, but we want you to know that there is a lot of resources out there, right? So I'm going to go really quickly. I did this last week. I'm going to do it again. Go through some of the programs that we teach as advanced specialists to help you acquire the tools that you could use to effectively heal from all of the losses that you have had in your life, the current ones and all of the past ones. Because when you go through one of our programs, you will know and you will learn that our losses have happened ever since we were little kids. Ever since we were little kids, and you get to acquire these tools that will teach you how to heal from every single one of them. So this first one I want to talk to you guys about is this 2-day personal workshop. In fact, I actually have one coming up this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I have 2 seats left. So if anybody is interested in wanting to learn how to acquire the grief recovery method tools in the shortest amount of time, the 2-day workshop is where you want to do that, right? It's an intensive group setting, so it is a group. I can have a maximum of 8 people there. So I have 2 seats left, and you will learn all of the things about grief recovery. We touch on the surface on some of the stuff like the myths and the stirbs, and what happens if you don't heal your heart, right? The things that Michelle talked about. And we told you about the definitions of grief. What you didn't learn from these workshops are the actual tools that we teach you, the tools that you can take and use for the rest of your life. Okay, so again, September 25th and 26th, you can email me. All of you guys have my email address. So email me and let me know if you're interested. I've got 2 seats left and I can give you all the details of that. The next one that we all teach here, the advanced specialists, is we teach the one-on-one program, but we teach it online. So in this space, in this era of COVID-19 that we're in, a lot of people still fear of getting out, and we get that, right? So we are fortunate enough that we are advanced certified so that we can teach the one-on-one in-person program online. It's guided. We use the grief recovery handbook that John James talked about in the pre-presentation video. And again, any one of us 5 ladies can walk you through this. It's a total of 7 sessions long, and it's once a week, and it usually lasts for about an hour each session. So if you're interested in acquiring the grief recovery method tools through this method, you can also get a hold of any one of us. So you can come to our Facebook page, or you can email me and let me know, hey, Darlene, I want to work with Raylene. How can I get a hold of her, right? And then I can refer you out, okay? And then the last program that I want to talk to you guys about is our Helping Children with Loss program. Now, this is not for us helping the kids. This is about us teaching you, the adults, an amazing communication tool that you can use to help the kids, to teach you how to communicate to the children so that they don't grow up the way we grew up, not knowing what to do when we're dealing with so much emotional trauma, loss, changes in our life. Imagine our kids growing up from such a young age, being emotionally resilient, right? I always tell people this, that my grandkids, I'm very grateful that they know loss at such a young age, but it also saddens me that they know loss at such a young age, right? They saw their papa, they saw that he died, and the pain that I went through, the pain that their parents went through, the pain that they went through. But now they get to know and understand what it means to honor your human emotions. Some will say, hey, they're dramatic. They may be, if that's what you want to call it, but they're emotionally in tune with themselves. They know when to say, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm scared. You want your kids to be able to say that to you and feel safe saying it to you, instead of saying, hey, what's wrong? Nothing. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. But really they're not, because guess what? You're not a safe person for them. Why? Because of the way we all grew up with that belief system. Be strong, grieve alone, time heals. Don't feel bad, replace the loss, all of those things, right? I taught my kids all of those things. And I'm very thankful that now my grandkids can learn something different, right? So this program here is phenomenal in us adults teaching our kids emotional resiliency so that they can grow up understanding loss at a level that we didn't learn when we were young kids, so they can grow up being emotionally resilient and not have to worry about dealing with the things that we talked about today: murder, suicide, self-harm. Okay. So finally, these are our resources that we're going to leave with you. In addition to us, the grief recovery team, if you know someone, or if you are that person that is thinking about suicide, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK, or our local 24-hour crisis hotline, 671-647-8833/34. If I were you, I would take a snapshot of this page and have these numbers handy. And then you can get a hold of any one of us ladies on Facebook, at Grief Recovery Guam and CNMI, or if you just type in Giving Grief a Voice, we changed the front name of it. So it's called Giving Grief a Voice, and you can get a hold of us there. So that is the end of our presentation. I'm going to stop it, but I do have a couple of people that I want to call up because they were very kind enough to be willing to share their story. So I'm going to ask, I'm looking for her here, Bree Francisco. Bree, if you can unmute yourself, hun, and honor us with sharing your story about how you came to grief recovery.
Hi, everyone. I hope the volume's okay. Good evening. Brianna Francisco. And while I have my story with how I got into grief recovery, I share it with, a lot of my close friends and families who, struggle with grief, either, from a job or just the various different griefs that we go through in life, right? And for me, my journey, probably my mid-20s, I lost, a couple of people back to back. First it was the loss of my grandma, who I was very close with. And I was the caregiver for my mom and my auntie, her sister. They both had cancer, and I was their caregivers, and they died, just months apart. And through their deaths, I found grief recovery. Actually, by chance, I would wake up every day and I felt, such an emptiness, and I was really in a dark space where my sleeping was off. I could try to keep myself busy. I went back to work right away. And I remember I would always wake up and just walk outside and just look. I would just look, just outside and just stare off. And my mind would just be blank because I was filled with so much sadness and darkness, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember pulling up a PDN article, and it was actually Darlene's article about grief during the holidays. And it was right before Thanksgiving, I believe. And when I read that article, I really just burst into tears because I felt no one understood what I was going through. I didn't have any close friends or family members who, had lost a parent. And, I was extremely close to my mom, and, our relationship was, it was really beautiful. And she, to see someone you love suffer, right? It's really hard. And I didn't know anyone knew what I was feeling, but when I read that article and Darlene talked about the grief recovery methods and how it's okay to be okay with how you feel, and I actually attended the sessions, and those really helped. Those sessions really helped me to understand what I was feeling, and to know that ultimately it was okay to feel that I wasn't okay. It was okay to understand how I was feeling and all these thoughts that I had, because for a long time before I found, grief recovery, I just thought this is not normal. This is not how someone is supposed to, feel. And, also not having anyone around you to talk to about that, because you're just trying to be strong. And, growing up on Guam, there's that stigma in our culture, right? That you don't talk about your feelings, and you don't talk about, all these feelings you suppress inside. So I was internalizing a lot of those feelings. So, just understanding those methods really impacted my life during that time, but also today, because I still have the book and I still refer to it. And actually the session last week and this session has been, great refreshers for just a lot of those feelings that we have, right? Because grief is not just, something that's in your life at one time, right? It's something that we will continue to go through. And I'm really, truly grateful for understanding grief and putting into action, what I've learned. and knowing that it's okay truly to not be okay. And yeah, thanks, Star. That's my story. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous, but I really, I really, anyone who's thinking about it, or anybody on the call who's been having, or is going through grief, I really recommend just to attend some of the classes, or, there's a lot of things to take away. And it's just like I mentioned, it's things that will be with you forever, and it's there to help you as it's helped me. So thank you, Dar. Thank you for this time, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you so much, Bree. That was beautiful. And Bree took one of my group sessions, gosh, several years ago, I believe. And to this day, her and I still connect. Every time I come back to Guam, I'm always checking on her. She checks on me. And so it's the beautiful relationships that we also gain as grief recovery specialists with our clients. Our clients become family, and that's what I love about the method that we teach. So there's one more person that I want to bring up, and then we'll get into the questions. So Irani, if you can unmute yourself, hon.
Hi, everybody. Good
There
evening.
she is.
My name is Irani. Hi. I'm a little nervous too, but it's really, really nice hearing from Bree and just the whole seminar. So thank you for having us, and thank you for giving us the space to listen to everything you guys had to say and all of your experience. So I do want to add into my experience as well. I did meet Darlene and Auntie Bobby in 2018. I met them through Bernice as well. She was the one posting a lot of the grief recovery stuff, which I really didn't understand until I started going through a loss during that time. And even though I am familiar with death and loss, the loss that I was feeling at that time was new territory for me, because it was a type of loss that I wasn't just feeling for myself, but I was feeling with my friends. We went through losing one of our best friends to suicide, and just knowing how, like I said, it was really just new territory for me. And I lost my mom at a really, really young age, and that was something that at that time I knew I was still going through. And so it just really made me feel very lost. And I just knew, me losing my mom at a young age and knowing how unhealthy and alone I felt trying to recover from that, and having to deal with this now, I knew I couldn't do it. I knew I couldn't see clearly. I just knew I couldn't navigate it on my own. So it was a scarier time for me, because it wasn't just me that I had to think about now. It was also my friends, my different kind of family. And so I took a chance on reaching out to Auntie Bernice, and she introduced me to the program with Darlene and Auntie Bobby. And guys, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody who is on this call, we don't know each other. I don't know most of you, but you guys are here tonight, and you guys were able to listen to all the specialists had to say. And coming from my experience, this program has helped me tremendously. Like, it's changed my life. It's changed my perspective on a lot of things. I did also join the grief recovery as a group session as well. And that instantly was just such an uncomfortable thing at first. I wasn't sure what I was doing. Just hearing group session or help, it was such taboo, and looking back, it was already a bad experience for me when I was younger. They're like, oh, go to therapy, get help, do this. And doing that when you're younger and your mind is not fully matured, or there's such bad connotations to it, like you're not open to it. It really took another kind of loss for me to be open to getting help, or at least, reaching out. And so doing this, I was, or getting the help with Darlene and Auntie Bobby, it was very uncomfortable at first, but once I got through that door and I sat down with the group of people that I had no idea who they were, very much strangers, but just listening to them talk in less than like 5 minutes, I just felt safe. I felt heard. I really felt like I wasn't alone. Like, outside of my family, I felt like, wow, I didn't even have to say so much, but these guys understand what I'm going through. And I feel like they will help me navigate through my experience a little bit more better. The programs really helped me basically, like I said, navigate it in a healthier way. Sorry about that. It helped me navigate my grief through a healthier way. I like the fact that I did reach out to Darlene and Auntie Bobby for the current loss that I was going through, who is our best friend who we lost to suicide, and how they recognized and they also helped me, I guess, uncover and unfold the unresolved grief that I had. And in order for me to face and really recover from what I was going through presently, I really had to go back and understand and recognize everything else from the past and how that really relates to everything now. And they really just made it okay. They made everything okay for me and made me accept, like, you know, yeah, you had years of bad experience of recovering or grief, and just thinking grief was a bad thing or you shouldn't be doing it. Why you don't have a right to be sad? You're still alive. Stay strong. All of the myths of grief. What I truly appreciated was that they gave me space to accept the fact that that's really how I dealt with grief, and that they basically gave me a whole new meaning for grief, and yeah, and just changed how I saw it and how I navigate it now. And so it's just been such a relief, because now I can actually I make space for grief. I don't, when I recognize it and I know that I'm grieving or I'm disturbing, which you'll learn if you join the program, I can recognize it now and be like, hey, you're here, you're in this moment, this is it. Don't turn to the midst of grief. And what I also really liked is that I still do keep in touch, and I still remain in contact with everybody from the group sessions. It's really just a family outside of a family, and just really knowing that I'm not alone and no judgment at all. Really listening with their heart and just not trying to judge and everything like that. It's just so it's such a blessing to be part of a smaller, another kind of circle that you feel very safe in, especially with all the changes and all the experiences we're all going through daily. So I'm very, very, very grateful for the program. Like, any chance I get to talk about this program or how grief recovery method has helped me, I always take it. Like, I will always repeat the same story over and over. Like what Dar said earlier, we can sit here and talk about everything, and we'll never run out of things to say, because grief happens to us every day, and it's not just death, it's just changes in everything. And so I really, whoever is on this call, I really encourage you guys to show up for yourself. One thing I really learned is no one can really force us to get the help. It really starts with us. It's really on your own time and your own pace. If you really feel like, you know, you really can't do it on your own, that's okay. Like, at least you recognize that, hey, it's time for me to lean on someone else. And I promise you, someone will be there to catch you. And there's a lot of specialists in this call that will definitely catch you. And like I said, you will not regret it. It's such a good experience. It's a uncomfortable experience, but in a good way, in the best way. It really helps you uncover a lot of those issues you didn't want to face or don't want to admit, but really helps you navigate through your life and just reshaping your future and helping others as well. So thank you so much, Dar. Thank you so much, Auntie Bobby. I know Auntie Bernice is not in this call, but always grateful for you guys. And I'm so grateful for the group session that I met during that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you, Irani and Bree. Amazing women. You know, they came to us with their broken hearts, and they left feeling more human, if you will, right? And they're close friends now, right? They were both actually in the same class, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, so they remain, like Irani says, they become a family outside of your family, and that's what grief recovery is all about, guys. So I don't want to keep you guys too long. Kate, do we have any questions in the chat?
I do not see any questions. No
Okay.
questions.
All right, guys. Well, if there are no questions tonight, that's okay. You do have our information, right? Hopefully you screenshot that last page that we had with the resources. You can DM us on our Facebook page. You also have my email address. If there's a specific grief recovery specialist that was on the call tonight that you would like to work with, let me know and I will refer you out to them. And again, I have 2 slots left for my weekend workshop coming up. So if you're interested, make sure you get a hold of me right away. I know that those seats are going to go really quickly. So with that said, I'm going to say goodnight and then I'm going to allow the other ladies to say goodnight. But thank you all for showing up for yourselves and, you know, for just being a great audience tonight, allowing us to share our hearts and allowing Irani and Brianna to share theirs as well. So good night, everyone. And then I'm going to pass it on to Michelle and then we can just go down the line.
Thank you. Just underscore everything that Dar said. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for holding space for yourself. And I am very hopeful that some of the things that we shared with you this evening could be the starting point for you to maybe seek the help that you need, whether it's through us or any other resource, and also give you a little more tools if you know somebody that might be feeling a little unsafe and vulnerable and maybe having thoughts of suicide. We love you so much and we will see you back next week, Thursday.
Go ahead, Katie.
Good night, everybody. And I just want to give you all hugs. Good night.
Good
Mom.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you guys for showing up for yourselves. We love you all. And we hope to see you again next week.
Yeah, see you
Hugs.
Thursday.
Keep safe.